December 8, 1941. Imperial Naval Headquarters, Tokyo. Admiral Osami Nagano studied the reports from Pearl Harbor with satisfaction. 8 American battleships damaged or sunk, nearly 200 aircraft destroyed, 2,400 Americans dead. The American Pacific Fleet lay crippled. What Nagano didn't know, what no officer in the Imperial Japanese Navy could have conceived, was that aging ships rusting in America's reserve fleets were about to become part of history's most devastating naval expansion. Within 2 years, American shipyards would achieve production rates that Japanese naval planners had deemed physically impossible, launching ships faster than the Imperial Navy could track them, let alone sink them. The awakening of the reserve fleets. The James River Reserve Fleet near Fort Eustis, Virginia, represented one of several American ship graveyards where vessels from World War I lay in varying states of preservation. These ships, exact numbers remain uncertain but likely over 100 vessels, had been minimally maintained through the 1930s as congressional appropriations dwindled. They existed in a state of bureaucratic limbo, too valuable to scrap, too expensive to properly maintain, seemingly too obsolete to matter. The morning of December 8th transformed this maritime cemetery. Workers from Norfolk Naval Shipyard and civilian contractors descended on the anchorage. The reactivation orders were stunningly simple yet seemingly impossible. Return every possible vessel to service immediately. Initial inspections revealed daunting challenges. Engine rooms flooded, machinery corroded beyond recognition, bird nests in ventilation shafts. Some vessels had vegetation growing on their decks. Yet within weeks, ships began moving under their own power. The USS Bridgeport, originally a German liner seized in 1917, was among the first reactivated, black smoke pouring from stacks that hadn't drawn flame in over a decade. By spring 1942, dozens of vessels had been pulled from reserve, refurbished, and pressed into service. These weren't glamorous warships, but auxiliary vessels that would prove essential: repair ships, tankers, cargo vessels, and transports. Their reactivation provided immediate reinforcement when America desperately needed every hull that could float. The intelligence failure. In Tokyo, the Imperial Japanese Navy's intelligence apparatus, its exact size disputed but certainly understaffed, attempted to assess American capabilities. Their pre-war analysis suggested America might produce perhaps 500,000 tons of naval vessels annually, with possibly 2 million tons of merchant shipping under maximum effort. The methodology appeared logical. Japanese analysts counted American shipways, calculated steel production, assessed labor availability. Naval attachés who had served in Washington reported on American inefficiencies, labor disputes, racial tensions, peacetime complacency. One report noted that American shipyards operated well below capacity, with workers resistant to overtime. These observations, while accurate for peacetime, fundamentally misread American potential. Japanese analysts saw labor disputes without imagining those same unions pledging no strike agreements for the war's duration. They saw racial segregation without envisioning war creating new opportunities, however limited, for minorities in defense work. When intelligence officers suggested higher American capacity, their reports were often dismissed. The prevailing strategic doctrine, the Kantai-Kessen or decisive battle concept, assumed the war would end within a year through climactic naval engagement. Long-term American industrial capacity seemed irrelevant if the war would be decided before new ships could be built. By 1943, America would produce over 19 million tons of shipping, nearly 10 times what Japanese planners thought possible. This wasn't just an intelligence failure, but a catastrophic misreading of American society's capacity for mobilization. The Maritime Commission's mobilization. The United States Maritime Commission transformed overnight from a New Deal agency managing merchant marine decline into the orchestrator of unprecedented shipbuilding. Admiral Emory S. Land, the Commission's chairman, understood both engineering and bureaucracy. His declaration was simple: build ships faster than they can be sunk. The Commission's expanded wartime authority allowed it to commandeer shipyards, allocate materials, direct labour, and coordinate the entire production ecosystem. This coordination, invisible to Japanese intelligence focused on counting ships, would prove as important as the ships themselves. The Liberty Ship programme, based on a British design for simple cargo vessels, established the template for mass production. The design deliberately employed older technology, reciprocating engines instead of modern turbines, straight lines instead of complex curves. These ships were optimized for rapid construction by inexperienced workers. The first Liberty ship, SS Patrick Henry, launched September 27, 1941, required 244 days to complete. By early 1942, construction time had fallen below 100 days. By late 1942, some yards were completing ships in under 50 days. The learning curve was steep and continuous. The Commission also addressed the human element. New training programs could transform farmers into able seamen in weeks. The Merchant Marine Academy accelerated its program from 4 years to 18 months. By war's end, over 250,000 new merchant mariners had been trained, creating from nothing a merchant marine larger than Japan's entire maritime workforce. The Kaiser Revolution. Henry J. Kaiser entered shipbuilding with no maritime experience, but with revolutionary ideas from building dams. His approach was simple. Break complex projects into simple tasks, maximize parallel work, and invest in workers. At his Richmond, California yards, 4 separate facilities that would eventually contain 55 shipways total, Kaiser implemented assembly line shipbuilding. Traditional shipyards built vessels sequentially from keel up. Kaiser built ships in sections simultaneously. Bow sections were constructed while stern sections were built elsewhere. Deck houses were completed off-site, fully equipped, then lifted into place. The workforce transformation was equally revolutionary. When skilled shipbuilders proved scarce, Kaiser didn't lower standards. He redesigned the work. Instead of training complete shipbuilders, he trained specialists. A welder might master only one type of joint, but perform it perfectly thousands of times. Kaiser created supporting infrastructure to eliminate bottlenecks. When housing proved inadequate, he built entire cities. When workers needed health care, he created what became Kaiser Permanente. When childcare was lacking, he built 24-hour nurseries. Every obstacle to production was identified and eliminated. By mid-1942, Kaiser's yards were completing Liberty ships in remarkable time. While claims of specific record-breaking construction times should be viewed cautiously, the sustained pace of production was undeniable. The Richmond yards alone would produce over 700 vessels during the war. Pearl Harbor's paradox. The Pearl Harbor attack, while tactically successful, contained strategic miscalculations. Admiral Yamamoto Isoroku, the attack's architect, understood American potential better than his superiors. Having studied at Harvard and served in Washington, Yamamoto had seen American industrial capacity firsthand. His oft-quoted prediction about running wild for 6 months or a year reflected this understanding, though the famous sleeping giant quote attributed to him is likely apocryphal. The attack's immediate success seemed to validate Japanese planning, but critical elements were missed or ignored. The Pacific Fleet's carriers were absent. More importantly, Pearl Harbor's infrastructure, repair facilities, fuel storage, submarine base, remained intact. These facilities would enable rapid recovery. Most significantly, Pearl Harbor unified American opinion instantaneously. Pre-war America had been divided and isolationist. The attack transformed this overnight. Workers who might have resisted over time now worked double shifts. Unions suspended strike actions. Women entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers. The production statistics reflect this transformation. Ship deliveries accelerated monthly throughout 1942. Each increase represented not just more shipyards coming online, but existing yards becoming more efficient, workers becoming more skilled, and systems becoming more refined. The production surge. By mid-1942, American shipyards were achieving what Japanese planners deemed impossible. Monthly Liberty ship completions rose steadily, 5 in January, 14 in March, 33 in June, 67 in September. The peak came in October 1943, when 106 Liberty ships were completed, more than 3 per day. Japanese intelligence struggled to process these numbers. When neutral sources reported hundreds of new American vessels in Atlantic ports, Japanese analysts suggested various explanations. The Americans were counting the same ships multiple times, including Great Lakes vessels, or simply lying. Any explanation seemed more plausible than accepting the reality. Each Liberty ship represented enormous coordination. Thousands of tons of steel had to be delivered in proper sequence. Engines from multiple manufacturers had to arrive precisely when needed. Components from hundreds of suppliers had to flow without interruption. The organizational capability this represented was as impressive as the ships themselves. Meanwhile, reactivated reserve fleet vessels provided crucial support. Repair ships could return damaged vessels to service without lengthy voyages to shipyards. Tankers extended operational range. Ammunition ships, despite their dangerous cargo, maintained the supply of ordnance that American firepower doctrine demanded. Submarine perspectives. Japanese submarine commanders provided the most direct witness to American expansion. Their war patrol reports, often dismissed by superiors as exaggeration, documented the transformation of American naval power. Commander Kinashi Takakazu of I-19 achieved spectacular success in September 1942, sinking the carrier USS Wasp. But his subsequent patrols reported increasingly difficult conditions: larger convoys, denser escort screens, continuous air patrols. By 1943, attacking American convoys had become nearly suicidal. The evolution of American anti-submarine warfare, enabled by industrial abundance, transformed the Pacific. Escort carriers, many converted from merchant hulls, provided air cover far from land. Destroyer escorts, produced in hundreds, hunted submarines relentlessly. Radar and sonar improved continuously. By late 1943, Japanese submarines had largely shifted from offensive operations to supply runs for isolated garrisons. The hunters had become the hunted, forced to avoid detection rather than seek targets. One commander noted bitterly that the Americans seemed to have built a destroyer for every ton of rice in Japan. The shipyard ecosystem. The Kaiser shipyards exemplified American production methods at their peak. The Richmond complex operated continuously, with day and night shifts maintaining constant activity. The prefabrication system had evolved to remarkable sophistication. Major ship sections were built in separate assembly areas. Bow sections weighing over 200 tons were constructed as units. Stern sections were built with propeller shafts already installed. Deck houses arrived fully equipped with plumbing and electrical systems. These sections were then assembled on the shipways like giant three-dimensional puzzles. The workforce included unprecedented numbers of women, reaching 25 to 30% in some yards, and minorities. While discrimination persisted and opportunities remained limited, the war had opened industrial jobs previously denied to these groups. The average worker had less than a year's experience, yet productivity exceeded pre-war standards. Supporting infrastructure was equally impressive. Miles of railroad track moved materials, massive cranes, some specially built to handle weights traditional shipbuilders said couldn't be lifted, moved sections into place. Machine shops, foundries, and assembly areas operated in coordinated sequences. Strategic recognition. Within Japanese leadership, recognition of inevitable defeat came at different times but followed similar patterns. After initial successes, gradual doubt emerged, followed by sudden acknowledgement of mathematical impossibility. The Marianas' defeat in June 1944 marked a turning point. The Battle of the Philippine Sea, dubbed the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot by American pilots, demonstrated overwhelming American superiority. Task Force 58 brought more carriers, battleships, and escorts than the entire pre-war Imperial Navy. Japanese naval aviation was effectively destroyed, losing over 400 aircraft while shooting down fewer than 30 American planes. Admiral Toyoda Soemu, commanding the combined fleet, later acknowledged that after the Marianas, he knew the war was lost. The Americans had built a navy Japan couldn't fight, supplied by merchant fleets Japan couldn't sink, supported by industry Japan couldn't match. The appearance of B-29 bombers over Japan in late 1944, flying from Marianas bases, made American superiority visible to civilians. While Japanese fighters could reach B-29 altitudes with difficulty, they rarely successfully intercepted these raids. Each bomber represented American industrial capability, complex, expensive, mass-produced. The victory ship evolution. Even as Liberty ships poured from shipyards, the Maritime Commission implemented improvements. Victory ships addressed Liberty ship limitations while maintaining mass production advantages. They were faster, stronger, and more efficient. The key improvement was speed. Liberty ships' 11-knot maximum made them vulnerable to submarines. Victory ships could achieve 15 to 17 knots, enough to outrun surfaced submarines and reduce voyage times significantly. Hull design improvements eliminated structural weaknesses that had caused some Liberty ships to develop cracks. Production transition demonstrated American adaptability. Shipyards switched from Liberty to Victory production without significant delays. Workers adapted to new techniques while maintaining productivity. By mid-1944, Victory ships were being completed as quickly as the simpler Liberty ships had been built earlier. Over 500 Victory ships would be built, many serving decades after the war. Their durability validated the mass production approach. Quantity hadn't sacrificed quality when properly managed. Social transformation. The shipyard workforce represented dramatic social change. Women performed jobs previously considered impossible for them: welding, riveting, crane operation. African Americans found opportunities, though limited by persistent discrimination, in skilled positions previously denied them. Kaiser's innovations extended beyond the shipyard. His healthcare system, established to keep workers healthy and productive, pioneered prepaid medical care. Childcare centres operated around the clock. Housing projects created instant communities. Vanport City near Portland housed over 40,000 residents at its peak, becoming Oregon's second-largest city virtually overnight. These social support systems weren't charity, but calculated investments in productivity. Healthy workers were productive workers. Workers with childcare could work any shift. Workers with housing near shipyards spent less time commuting. Every barrier to production was identified and addressed. The productivity achieved was remarkable. Man-hours per ship fell continuously as workers gained experience and systems improved. By late 1944, a Liberty ship required about one-third the labour hours of early 1942 construction. This wasn't just efficiency, but transformation of work itself. The mathematics of defeat. By 1945, the arithmetic of American victory was undeniable. The Philippines campaign demonstrated American ability to project overwhelming force anywhere in the Pacific. Invasion fleets numbered hundreds of vessels, supported by supply trains that stretched across the Pacific. At Iwo Jima, concentrated American firepower exceeded anything in military history. The preliminary bombardment expended more ammunition than many nations possessed in total. At Okinawa, the assembled fleet exceeded 1,400 vessels, likely the largest naval concentration ever assembled. The Kamikaze campaign, Japan's desperate attempt to inflict unacceptable losses through suicide attacks, achieved tactical successes but strategic irrelevance. Dozens of ships were sunk, hundreds damaged. In previous wars, such losses might have halted operations. Against American industrial output, they were absorbed and replaced without strategic impact. By summer 1945, American naval forces operated with casual abundance that would have seemed fantastical in 1941. Damaged ships were repaired and returned to service. Lost ships were replaced. The mathematics had become insurmountable. Industrial victory. The atomic bombs that ended the war obscured a fundamental truth. Japan was already defeated by conventional industrial warfare. The bombs accelerated surrender, but didn't cause defeat. That had been determined in American shipyards. Between December 1941 and August 1945, American shipyards produced over 5,000 merchant vessels, totaling more than 50 million deadweight tons. Japan produced a fraction of this. America built more ships in single months than Japan built in entire years. The disparity extended beyond mere numbers. American ships incorporated continuous improvements. Quality control improved even as quantity increased. Innovation continued throughout mass production. This combination, quantity, quality, and continuous improvement, proved insurmountable. Admiral Land's Maritime Commission had orchestrated victory through logistics. Ships were built faster than enemies could sink them. Crews were trained faster than enemies could kill them. This was victory through industrial arithmetic, the reckoning. Post-war interrogations revealed how Japanese officers gradually recognized defeat's inevitability. Early victories had seemed to validate strategy, but each subsequent engagement showed Americans stronger while Japan grew weaker. One senior officer provided a stark timeline. After Midway, we had lost the initiative. After Guadalcanal, we had lost momentum. After the Marianas, we had lost the war. After the Philippines, we awaited the end. After Okinawa, we prayed for it. The home front's recognition lagged, but followed inevitably. Government propaganda maintained victory claims even as cities burned, but B-29 raids, naval bombardment, and submarine blockade made reality undeniable. By spring 1945, most Japanese understood the war was lost, though few dared voice this recognition. The refusal to acknowledge mathematical reality cost hundreds of thousands of unnecessary deaths. Continuing resistance against impossible odds wasn't strategy, but denial. The atomic bombs provided a face-saving excuse to end what American shipyards had already decided. Lessons and legacy. The reserve fleet reactivation and subsequent shipbuilding surge demonstrated capabilities that transcended traditional military calculations. Democratic societies, when unified, could achieve mobilizations that authoritarian planners couldn't imagine. The production techniques developed, prefabrication, modular assembly, workforce specialization, influenced global manufacturing for decades. The social changes, women in industry, minorities in skilled positions, employer-provided healthcare, reshaped American society permanently. Japanese intelligence's failure wasn't primarily about gathering information, but about processing it. Cultural assumptions and strategic doctrine created filters that prevented accurate assessment. They could count ships but couldn't imagine the system producing them. They could see factories but couldn't envision their transformation. They understood tactics but not logistics. The contrast was stark. Japan brought sophisticated tactics, experienced crews, and spiritual determination. America brought industrial capacity, organizational capability, and mathematical inevitability. In modern industrial warfare, production mattered more than courage, logistics more than tactics, and arithmetic more than spirit. Conclusion: when democracy mobilized. The story of America's reserve fleet reactivation and the industrial expansion it represented reveals how World War II was won. Not through dramatic naval battles alone, but through shipyards, steel mills, and training centers across America. The aging ships that returned to service in 1941 were part of a transformation that would reshape global power. The Japanese miscalculation wasn't simple intelligence failure, but fundamental misunderstanding of American society's capacity for mobilization. They saw peacetime inefficiency without recognizing wartime potential. They counted ships without understanding the system that would produce them. They prepared for a war of battles while America prepared for a war of production. Henry Kaiser and others didn't just build ships, they revolutionized manufacturing. Their methods would influence industry globally. The social changes they initiated would reshape American society. The organizational capabilities they demonstrated would define modern logistics. The human dimension encompasses both triumph and tragedy. American workers achieved production miracles. Japanese forces fought courageously against mathematical impossibility. Civilians on both sides paid war's price. But the outcome was determined by industrial capacity, not military valor. The lessons remain relevant. Industrial capacity still underlies military power. Production capabilities still determine strategic options. Democratic societies still possess mobilization potential that surprises those who see only their peacetime inefficiencies. The reserve fleet vessels that returned to service in 1941 carried more than cargo across the Pacific. They carried proof that industrial democracy could transform from peacetime complacency to wartime dominance with speed and scale that shattered every assumption about modern war's limits. In shipyards across America, workers built not just ships, but a new world order, one vessel at a time. The mathematical reality was simple. America could build ships faster than Japan could sink them, train crews faster than Japan could kill them, and produce supplies faster than Japan could destroy them. This wasn't just victory, but transformation of warfare itself. The age of decisive battles had ended. The era of industrial warfare had arrived. Japan learned this lesson through devastating defeat. The empire that had seemed invincible in December 1941 was reduced to ruins by August 1945, defeated not by superior tactics, but by superior production, not by greater courage, but by greater capacity. The reserve fleets that rose from American waters had triggered an industrial tsunami that transformed the Pacific War from military contest to mathematical certainty. The final paradox is that Japan's post-war recovery would employ the very methods that had destroyed its empire. Japanese shipyards would adopt American production techniques. Japanese industry would embrace mass production. The lessons of the war would transform Japan from military power to economic powerhouse, proving that the industrial capabilities that won wars could also win peace. In the end, the story of America's Ghost Fleet is not just about ships, but about the transformation of warfare itself. When industrial capacity meets national will, when democratic societies mobilize for total war. When production becomes strategy, traditional military calculations become obsolete. The reserve fleet vessels that returned to service in 1941 didn't just help win a war, they proved that in the modern age, the factory floor had become as decisive as the battlefield, the assembly line as important as the battle line, and industrial arithmetic the ultimate arbiter of victory.